Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And we've got the announcement date for 9.1.5. That's going to be November 2nd. I think a lot of people are wondering, why aren't there more class changes? It would really be nice if we could get a couple more class changes before we go into it. I was starting to count it out. I thought that there wasn't going to be any more now with, what is it, less than 2 weeks. Before the patch was going to be going live. I thought that it was kind of like, we're going to get what we're going to get, which there are a couple of changes that you can check out in my other videos. I'll have them linked at the end here, but this looks like what could be the final round of changes, but maybe not, who knows, with this kind of stuffed through. There's a couple changes that are a little bit odd to me, and then there's a couple where I'm like, okay, that makes sense, and I think that could work in the long run. So the first round of changes is actually coming to Demon Hunter, and it's coming specifically to the conduit Dancing with Fate, which is a potency conduit. The final slash of Blade Dance deals an additional 40% damage, down from 75%. And you can see that every rank looks like it's almost cut in half, close to half. And that's a pretty significant nerf to this conduit. I think Demon Hunters, and at least in PvP, we're pretty much always running this conduit. In PvE, I would imagine so as well. And I'm not sure if this comes with, respects to changes towards AoE cap in PvE, and maybe it won't have too much of a consequence. It still seems like it's a big chunk of increased damage anyways, on the ability, even at 40%, down from 75. But in PvP, I'm not so sure that this was specifically something that Demon Hunter really needed to have happen to it, so you might be a little bit sad about it. Moving down towards Resto Druid. This is a change that I actually think makes a lot of sense, and it's a PvP specific change to one of their conduits, the Floral Recycling Potency Conduit. And this is the Swiftman's healing is increased by 40% of the consumed heal over time effect, and it is now reduced by half in PvP. So this means that maybe there's not going to be any more lay on hands heals. It's still, the big heal comes from your nature swiftness, but now you won't maybe be able to rely on both. You're generally using Swiftmen to extend your heal over time effects with your legendary. You like getting the value of the heal, but the main value comes from extending the Cenarian Ward in PvP. I think that it's good, though, to look at some of these direct healing effects from Resto Druid, because to me, when I think of Resto Druid, I'm not thinking of a healer that's kind of able to bounce somebody's health back from nothing immediately all of the time. I usually think of like a Holy Paladin when I think of that type of healing archetype. With Druid, I think of like swapping off their hots. They need to stay ahead of damage, maybe even crowd control to stop damage, to let their hots pick up their targets. That's sort of the way the fantasy fits for me in PvP with Resto Druid, and this goes more so in that direction. Will it completely remove Resto Druid from play? Probably not. It was still just a massive heal in itself, and I can only imagine if 9.2, if conduits are even going higher, having this on this specifically would be a good idea. It does make me wonder if they could also take a look at some other conduits I think that are causing problems in PvP. There are a lot of healing ones and a lot of absorb ones on mage, for example, that are adding a lot of additional healing into the game. And then obviously ones that enhance things like Spinning Crane Kick for Windwalker Monk. It would be, I think, a good idea to look at those specifically if it is possible at this point. But this makes sense for putting Resto Druid back kind of into the vibe of where I think Resto Druid should be. And Resto Druid is just really good at the moment. So I think that this one makes a lot of sense. Now for Mage, Frost specifically, you're going to be pretty happy about this. Your flurry is getting buffed by roughly, that's some tough math, let's say 3%. So 3% more flurry damage. But your mastery is also getting an increased modifier. And you're going to have to forgive me on how to read this modifier, right? Because it's 0.019 now getting increased to 0.02128. And it affects your icicles. It looks like it'll affect the damage of your frozen orb. So, some mastery damage increased. Maybe we see some mastery verse builds in PvP. I really doubt it. In PvE, fire is still doing phenomenally. I'm not sure where Frost would fit in with PvE after these changes. But the thing that I like about this change is that it's a good approach, just dragging up the damage, the baseline amount of damage outside of cooldowns slowly over time. And I think this is where you can get to specs feeling more intense, at least in PvP. So their damage is a little bit more outside of their cooldown windows. I think that this is a good direction for doing that. And it's obviously going to be a bit of a challenge if they want to try and make as many or as minimum amount of PvP changes as possible, so spells aren't affected differently in different aspects of the game. That can be tough to not then also imbalance it in PvE where one spec is just monstrously ahead. But I think that Frost Mage was one of those specs that was kind of underrepresented. We haven't seen a lot of it. Do remember that Dark Soul is now unpurgeable from Warlocks, and it has been the kind of Mage Warlock having a lot of synergy for a while. So that might be a comp that you want to look to try out, and especially Necrolord. We may see Necrolord Frost Mage, and that they're nerfing Triune Ward, so the tankiness of Mage is going to be going down slightly. So going Frost, getting those snares to try and avoid damage, and getting the uptime of your Ice form, and through Deathborn from being Necrolord, and getting the Fleshcraft Shield to make yourself more durable might be the path for you as a mage in PvP. But regardless, slight buff here, and maybe more than slight on the mastery. Somebody who's good at math is going to have to calculate that one, but it is a buff nonetheless. And then also, it looks like Frostbolt is also getting a 4% buff. Almost missed that one right there. So again, this is great. It's just hitting all of the spells that are outside of their cooldowns. This is going to work really well with the Ice Form build. Frost Mage could potentially come out really far ahead here, moving into this patch, especially because of its synergies with Warlock. We see Holy Priest also getting buffed a lot, so maybe a Holy Priest Wizard Cleave. That's something we haven't seen in a long time. It will definitely do really good into some of the melee cleaves that are currently playing, but I would think that it's going to start to struggle with Rogue Mage, but maybe not so much now with Triune Ward getting nerfed. Remember that there are a couple of changes coming through that could change things up, with the Resto Druid losing some healing now and Swiftman maybe as well. We might see things start to mix up. Then moving down to Warrior, we're going to be looking at Fury Warrior, and it looks like Fury Warrior is just getting a flat buff to its single target damage at all times, and they're saying it's going to roughly equate to a 4% increase in single target damage. It's their auto attack, so if you're getting uptime on a Fury Warrior, you're going to be doing a lot more, well, not a lot more, 4% more damage. Again, these changes don't seem like they're massive. They're not coming out of left field for these specializations. I'm not sure if it's going to completely rock our world, mix things up so much to the point where these are suddenly at the top of the leaderboard, but I think that this is the correct approach, because this is the approach that's got other specs that were completely not played at all, right? Like if we go back to the start of the expansion, Beastmaster Hunter wasn't played at all. Then it got a little buff, 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 and look how big and strong it is now. So if we take that approach, right, with the other specializations, something like Outlaw Rogue, Fury Warrior, Frost Mage, this is a good way to get them more competitive. There are specs like Arcane Mage and stuff that I think are in need of kind of the same touch-up that we saw Shadow Priest and Arms Warrior get at the start of Shadowlands, but I don't think that is something that is going to be happening before an expansion. So to me, the best short-term solution to try and get some variety and try and help some of these specs that are really underrepresented, like I'm pretty sure Prot Paladin has a higher play rate above 1800 in PvP than Fury Warrior, a Frost Mage, and Arcane Mage, I'm pretty sure. So I mean, getting some of these specs above Prot Paladin, I think would be a wise move in trying to increase the variety, because throughout the start of the expansion, we've definitely seen more variety, right? It was only Paladins at the start. Now we see pretty much every healer. Druids, I would say, maybe slightly ahead in terms of overall popularity, but the healers are at least all somewhat viable. Sorry, Mistweaver, maybe you're not. Mistweaver still kind of struggling, and again, that's kind of a spec that I think needs a touch up, as well as that we saw Arms Warrior and Shadow Priest get. As far as healers go, it just doesn't have its own identity, at least when it comes to PvP. I know one way that it would make it more competitive is just simply adding a damage reduction to its life cocoon, and that would help it out in PvE as well, because in PvE it's just all about making sure you have a damage reduction and then throughput to do damage. But its overall, its main strength as Mistweaver is just throughput healing, but damage isn't about throughput. It's about surviving these burst spikes and reducing the damage of the burst spikes, and it doesn't have a way to do that. So it kind of struggles at that. But I think that this is a good approach. It's just that we're going to need a couple more than this, right? Like, it's like, yep, you buffed some of the specs. I think that this was a good direction. It's targeting all the same things that we've been asking it to be targeted, at least when it comes to PvP. If you're PvE, then I'm not sure if these changes really impact you too much. But like a couple of these, And then we start seeing some more variety, right? Like we saw jungle brought up, all the other healers brought up in this most recent patch. Now, hopefully, we can play some alts and try some different covenants. Please reduce the honor on upgrading gear, so that players can start playing some alts. I think right now that there's a lot of things that I would love to experiment with that would get me to play the game a lot more and try different things if it wasn't locked behind this time wall of 100 trillion honor on my gear specifically. That I would really like to go out and just try. It would definitely extend the life of the game, because again, we're working through some, what do we call them, like turbulent times. These are unprecedented times. So I think that by opening up the floodgates a little bit to allow players to try different builds, experiment with different classes, play some alts, some slow buffs to sustain damage like we've seen in this change, then we're going to have a lot of variety. We're going to have players experimenting on different builds. We're going to see a ton of creativity. And that's, for at least for me, what gets me really excited, me going for the game and wanting to play the game, and then hopefully able to encourage other people to play the game because of how much fun that is for me, at least personally. That's what I would like to see moving forward. But other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this update. If you did, please leave it with a thumbs up and comment down below with your thoughts. What do you think needs to be buffed specifically, nerfed specifically? Is 9.1.5 starting to grab your attention? Are you looking to come back to the game, to give it a go now with the covenant flexibilities, with those increased in conquest gains towards PvP gear specifically? I'm a little bit biased again towards PvP, just being kind of a PvP main. And now with some of these sustained damage buffs, that we just need a couple more and a couple of other specs. And I really do like these types of changes, targeting these conduits that are just kind of like really out there as far as healing and shields and absorbs are concerned in PvP, and just cut them in half. Anything that's a shield, a healer, and absorb, cut that in half. And then PvP is going to be, I think, feeling like in a really good spot. And then maybe look at some of the modifiers that are stacking cooldowns together for these big kind of one-shot moments, because I don't think it'll be necessary if the healing is brought down. Games should be able to feel more intense and be able to end without absolutely KOing somebody. But other than that, again, thank you very much for watching the video. If you'd like to follow me on twitch.tv/Supatease, I'm streaming at 11 a.m. PST roughly every day. We're going to be doing a lot of viewer games, so if you're interested in trying to climb some ranks, today I think we helped the druid get to 1800. So if you're looking for some assistance to try and climb some ratings, or just a partner to play with because you're struggling to find people to play with, then check out my twitch.tv. And other than that, I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.